In a 2022 study from Deloitte, 91% of respondents shared that they had specific goals for improving their well-being. 75% of employees and 89% of C-suite executives shared that improving their well-being was a top priority. And lastly, that same report shared that 68% of employees and 81% of C-suite executives said that improving their well-being was more important than advancing their careers. So let's start today by defining well-being.
Good question, Erica. I see it as the whole person. You're physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. You can't separate it. And so well-being is about the wholeness of all those working together.
Yeah, it makes great sense. The whole sense of congruence. We tend to focus on one. I've worked with a lot of companies where they hire a wellness person, and that wellness person is typically focused on exercise, diet, maybe some of the routines of the day, but we're not paying attention to the emotional, relational side of things. In fact, companies typically are not so great at that, and we may be caring for the physical wellness, but actually be pressing and increasing some of the stress levels in the other areas.
Because we bring our whole selves to work. So if I had a bad day getting out of the car this morning, that shows up with me until I process that and can handle that in order to go into the day either with a clear mind or with a mind that is clouded from all the noise in my head.
Yeah. One of the phrases I learned from our friends in AA is the phrase, everywhere I go, there I am. So whatever's happening at home is coming in the door to work with me, and frankly, it goes home with me as well.
Yeah.
And we know organizations cannot be healthy without healthy people. So most things tend to start at the top. Why is workplace well-being important, and how important is it for the leader to demonstrate and model well-being?
Well, this is where these things can really clash, right? Because businesses particularly are often focused on productivity, bottom line, how many things did we make, how successful were we? And that's often at odds with that sense of well-being. And so we're sometimes working against ourselves, particularly folks in the C-suite.
And it's hard to underestimate the power of modeling. And so when an employee, a boss, a supervisor says, yes, take your time off, but then they never take any time off. The subtle message is, don't take time off. And so we have to always be aware of the verbal and nonverbal because we're sending both messages with how we communicate well-being. And so the leaders have to model it. They have to be willing to talk about it and talk about even ways that they're growing, their goals for the year, what they're hoping to accomplish, because it creates more safety with each other. It allows people to know, oh, okay, you don't have it all together. You don't expect me to have it all together.
Yeah. But that's an invitation to vulnerability. Again, not a key strength for those who have found their way to success and leadership in the company. So if you can set a tone for a healthy organization that's well, not just individual well-being, but an organization that is invested in its own well-being, that opens the door to vulnerability and to say, I'm not okay yet, but I'm working on it. And what a way for a leader to model that.
82% of employees say that they stay with a company because they have friends there. What are some suggestions for introducing well-being in the workplace?
Wow. But the relational side of things, right? My well-being is not self-contained. We wish it were in many cases, and we tend to isolate that to my workout or some of my personal routines. Our society tends to be very individualistic, and we even link that to our success. In a healthy company, success is very relational. Your success is actually shared with me, and I invest in your success. You can create that kind of culture. You start having conversations on a different level.
Yeah, Gallup did a study of a bunch of other studies and kind of summarized it. And they said social relationships, especially with supervisors, is very important to well-being. Making jobs more interesting through job crafting, having an employee have a say in their job and what their job description, and I was add, having an employee have a say in their passions and their personality. How does that relate to the job and to what they're doing? And the third one was improving work-life balance, because especially coming out of the pandemic, people care a little bit more about how much time I'm in the office, how much time at home, how am I juggling? Is there flexibility? Is there ability for me to still do home well while do my job well? And companies that are more rigid are finding that much harder, as opposed to companies that are more flexible, and leaders and supervisors that are more flexible tend to find better employees because they feel like, okay, if my kid's sick, I know I can adjust to be home, or there's some flexibility there to do something.
Yeah. We do a number of stress surveys with organizations, and there's 7 key areas we look at. A couple that seem to bubble up a lot are supportive relationships in the workplace and the manager-employee relationship. They're both social relationships in some way. When those are out of sync, I either feel isolated or threatened. Links very closely to job security, and that's just a recipe for a lack of well-being. When those relationships are more open, healing, consistent, you see an increase in well-being.
Can you talk a little bit more about how we manage stress in the workplace?
Well, sure. It's hard because if you're going to address this, you really want to address it, first of all, from an organizational standpoint. Organizations have their own life, and they can be stress-inducing, in which case we're all under a high level of stress, and that becomes self-perpetuating. We may be neutral. Can an organization actually grow to be stress healing, where it actually is a place where expectations are still high, we're performance-oriented? That actually increases our good stress, which is we are in a team seeking to do something well together. If we can do that, that's where we are in our sweet spot. But it's a really hard step for businesses, particularly when they have a strong leader or a strong owner, to say, let me look at my company. Are we a stress-inducing organization? That requires an openness and vulnerability that a lot of type A's really struggle with.
Yeah, and especially for younger employees, I think it's important to understand that stress is not a negative,
right,
or that it has to be avoided at all costs. We actually need stress, and stress is good. As you were talking about, there's good stress in companies, just like there's good conflict in companies. We can't be afraid of those things. Those actually help companies perform better and work better. And so understanding your stress culture and then understanding your own personal stress, like what's going on at home. How am I doing with work? Do I have job security? Those are all things that we can help measure and also help correct along the way if there's any deficits or deficiencies to say, yeah, we can help improve this in your culture. And we do that a lot with organizations.
Yeah. We talk about taking the temperature of stress, which is one thing, but that could just be observing. We also want to be thermostats that are setting some of the tone for managing stress well. Begins with an openness, but then it begins with also taking responsibility. If I uncover that I am creating a stressful environment, or a certain department or division is in a high stress situation, am I willing to take the responsibility to do something about it?
Mm-hmm. Gen Z and millennials say that the top priority for them from an employer is growth. They want skill development, they want upward growth, and they'll leave to go to someone who will provide that for them. What do you say to the leader that fears or is hesitant to invest in the growth of their employee because they fear they'll leave?
To be vulnerable, I've been that leader, and I had to learn some really hard lessons. If I tried to cap, control, contain my good employees, they found a way to leave, to be honest. But if I invested in their growth, I found that actually made them sticky. This was a place where they could grow. Some have the need to go elsewhere, and I had to find a way to celebrate that. I was actually helping create leaders in other organizations. By the way, they stay in touch. I've had several come back to work with me and work with me at a higher level because I was invested in their growth.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mind shift to say, I'm going to trust my employees. So there's a high trust relationship, but there's a risk because you may invest in somebody and they may leave. But I remember a story that one of my professors shared when he was consulting with an organization that had a more narrow view of employee reimbursements for education. And so he's talking to my professor and said, hey, can you help with this? Because I have my favorite employee wants to go take some classes. And I told him no, and he was really discouraged because he wanted to take nursing classes, and we're business. And we're doing business things, and our reimbursement wouldn't reimburse it for it. So my professor said, well, why don't you do a test? See what happens. Give him permission to use the money for a non-business class. Let him take the nursing class. See what happens. Because what could happen? He may fall in love with nursing. You would be funding, but you would be creating somebody that's going to go out and impact the world. And while they're working for you, you're going to get a better employee because you're investing in them and in their passion, even though it's not directly benefiting the company. Well, the employee went and took one nursing class, realized they hated it, shifted back to business, and became one of the most faithful employees to that company. Why? Because the owner trusted and said, we trust you to make wise decisions with your education. So we trust you. That's just a little example, but it's a shift because it is a risk. People will take advantage of you. Mm-hmm. You will sometimes, but overall, you're going to get better productivity, more faithfulness of employees, and deeper connection when you invest in your employees.
One thing we did at my prior company was we identified the 1 or 2 people each year that were exemplifying the values, what we were trying to be and accomplish as a company. And we did an annual award, and that was a cash award that was specifically for them to continue their growth and invest in classes, whatever that might be, a certification. Some moved on, but some really stuck and became better. And that really became infectious because it was rewarded and recognized in some way.
Yeah. What do you say to the person listening who asks, when is enough enough? Isn't someone's well-being their responsibility?
Life's not that simple. But we are each other's keeper in some way. Individual accomplishment is a very short sprint. We're in a marathon as organizations, and that reminds me of that old phrase, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Most companies, if they can get over themselves and think beyond the next quarter of profitability, whatever, would understand that retention really matters. Some employees are just going to get tired, and enough might be enough, and we have to be able to send them on their way well. That's far better than having them just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We obviously can't exhaust this topic, but what would you like to leave people with?
If you're a business owner, if you're a leader in an organization, stop, take the temperature of the situation, and don't just watch it, become that thermostat. What are some basic things that we can do to first talk about it? Just talk about it. We struggle with that as organizations. If there's a stress point, just get it on the table and start talking.
Yeah, start with yourself. You know, leaders often are so focused on the business, the next quarter, and not stopping to say, wait, what's going on inside of me? And what am I modeling to my employees? How am I building them? And so take time, do coaching, get some insight, let people come in and look under the hood of your organization, listen to your employees, hear what they're having. It just pays off when you invest in your company and your people. It always comes back to benefit through productivity, through commitment, through the people willing to stay. It just pays off when you invest in your people, because people are the heartbeat of any organization at any level.
Well, if we could ever help you in your leadership journey and your organization's leadership journey, we encourage you to visit our website. On our website, you could find enormous resources, including other videos, a number of blogs and other articles that we provide. And it even tells you more about how we partner with organizations to help them become effective.